What if everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and betrayal was turned upside down in a single moment? Imagine losing someone you loved like a brother, only to discover that their family, your family, had been hiding secrets so dark they could shatter everything you believed in. This is the untold story of Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner, two legends, one unthinkable tragedy. Rob Reiner and Billy Crystal were not merely friends, they were kindred spirits. Their bond went far beyond the superficialities of casual camaraderie. It was a rare, unspoken connection, a deep, unwavering friendship that had withstood the trials of time and the unpredictable nature of life. For decades, they shared experiences that defined their lives, both the euphoric peaks and the crushing lows. Their friendship was not built on empty words or fleeting moments. It was forged through laughter that healed wounds and quiet support during the most difficult of times. The type of friendship that so few are fortunate enough to experience, where even in silence there is an understanding. They had stood side by side through all that life had thrown at them, through joy, through sorrow, and through the shared rituals that bound their hearts together. From late-night conversations to unspoken glances, Billy and Rob had lived a lifetime of shared memories, each one more precious than the last. But then, on the fateful night of December 14th, 2025, their enduring bond was suddenly and brutally tested in the most unimaginable way. Billy's life, which had always been anchored by his friendship with Rob, was rocked to its very foundation when he received the horrifying news that Rob and his wife, Michelle Singer, had been murdered. The shock of the news was so intense, so devastating that it nearly shattered Billy. It was as if the very ground beneath him had crumbled away. The news of Rob's death hit him like a freight train, so swift, so forceful, that it left him gasping for air, his mind struggling to comprehend a reality he couldn't accept. He had lost his closest friend, a brother he had known for nearly half a century. The idea that Rob was gone, taken so violently and so suddenly, felt impossible. It was a loss that cut deeper than words could express, and Billy was left in a haze of shock and disbelief. Billy's grief was so profound, so all-consuming, that he could not sit idly by. He immediately rushed to the scene of the crime in Brentwood, the place where so many memories had been made, memories of laughter, friendship, and shared moments of joy. Now, standing in front of the house, Billy felt an overwhelming wave of sorrow crash over him. The house that had once been filled with warmth, joy, and celebration now stood as a hollow shell, its walls silent witnesses to a heinous act of violence. The transformation was surreal. It felt as though the house itself had been stripped of its soul, now reduced to nothing more than a cold, unfeeling monument to tragedy. Billy stood in the midst of it, his heart broken into 1,000 pieces, his world turned upside down. The house, which had held so many precious memories, now stood as an eerie reminder of the brutal loss of his best friend. But the tragedy did not end with the brutal murders of Rob and Michelle. In the wake of the horror, Billy knew he had to do something. He couldn't stay silent. His grief was so profound and his sense of betrayal so deep that he felt compelled to speak out. He reached out to Rolling Stone, his voice trembling with emotion as he recounted the dark secrets that had been hidden for years. His words came out in a rush, filled with pain and anger, as he revealed details of Rob's unfinished will, a document that had never been completed but hinted at a troubling reality. Billy spoke of a shocking plot orchestrated by Rob's own son, a betrayal that cut to the core of everything Rob had worked for. Rob had trusted his son with the future of the family's legacy, and yet that trust had been shattered in the worst possible way. There were whispers of a son trying to seize the family's assets, to claim what he believed was rightfully his. But what Billy revealed to the world was more than just a family squabble. It was a betrayal so deep that it threatened to unravel everything Rob had ever built. Billy's revelation was nothing short of explosive. It exposed a hidden, dark side of the Reiner family, a side that had remained cloaked in secrecy for years. The public was blindsided by the depth of the betrayal, and the revelation sent shockwaves rippling through Hollywood. No one had ever suspected that such treachery could lurk beneath the surface of a family that from the outside seemed so perfect, so united. But Billy's words painted a different picture, one of deceit, manipulation, and a legacy built on lies. The betrayal was so profound that it felt like a dagger to the heart of the entire entertainment world. Hollywood, which had always seen Rob as one of its own, was now forced to confront a side of him that had never before been revealed. Billy's decision to speak out was not just about his grief. It was about ensuring that Rob's legacy, his reputation, and the truth about his life would not be buried along with him. Billy's voice, filled with emotion and resolve, told a story of family secrets that had been buried for too long. He spoke of Rob's fears, his deep concern about his son's destructive behavior, and his desperation to protect the people he loved. Rob had gone to great lengths to shield his family from harm, even as he wrestled with the painful reality that his own son might be the one to destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. Billy spoke of his conversations with Rob, the moments when his friend had confided in him about his concerns and the devastating impact of his son's actions. Through Billy's words, a portrait of Rob Reiner began to emerge, one not just of the beloved director and actor, but of a man who had been caught in a battle within his own family. A battle that no one could have anticipated. It was a painful, heart-wrenching story that Billy shared, a story that painted Rob as not only a great artist, but a father who had tried and failed to protect the ones he loved the most. What Billy revealed was not just a tragedy. It was a cautionary tale of trust, betrayal, and the lengths to which one man had gone to protect his family from the very thing that had ultimately destroyed it. Billy's decision to speak out, to share Rob's darkest secrets, was a final act of loyalty to his friend, a final attempt to honor Rob's memory and ensure that the truth was known. It was a moment of raw emotion, one that would forever change the way Hollywood viewed Rob Reiner and the family he had left behind. Billy's words, though filled with anger and grief, were also an expression of love, a love for a man who had been more than a friend but a brother. On the fateful day that the unimaginable tragedy unfolded, as the full details of the brutal murders began to trickle out, Billy found himself sitting at home with his wife, Janice. The air in their home, which had always been a place of comfort and peace, felt charged with a heavy, suffocating energy. The phone rang incessantly, each call seeming to weigh down on Billy's already fragile state. The ringing was unrelenting, like the echo of a nightmare he couldn't escape, with each call bringing more unbearable news, each word a reminder of the devastation that was slowly consuming his life. Billy answered the phone, but it wasn't until a close friend called with a voice so trembling it was barely recognizable that the full horror of the situation became clear. "Billy," the friend said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Something terrible has happened to Rob and Michelle." The words hit Billy like a physical blow, and for a moment time itself seemed to freeze. His mind refused to accept what was being said, the words too cruel, too incomprehensible. "What?" Billy repeated, the word a mere whisper, a desperate plea for something, anything, that could offer an explanation. The word echoed in the room, his disbelief hanging in the air like a thick fog. Billy's shaking hands failed him as the phone slipped from his grasp, the receiver falling to the floor with a soft clink. His body went numb as his mind struggled to make sense of the words that had just shattered his reality. Janice stood beside him, her face draining of color as the gravity of what they had just heard sank in. Her eyes filled with tears, her heart breaking not only for their friends, but for the man she loved, who was now standing at the precipice of an abyss of grief. She couldn't understand it either. She couldn't process it. She had no words to make sense of the horror they had just been told. She stood frozen, paralyzed by the shock, her hand instinctively reaching for Billy, desperate to ground him, to anchor him in a world that no longer seemed real. Billy, unable to bear the weight of the revelation, collapsed onto the sofa. The breath left his body in a slow, shuddering exhale, as if his lungs were not equipped to handle the pain that had suddenly flooded his chest. His head dropped low, his hands instinctively covering his face, as though doing so would block out the painful images flashing through his mind. In that moment, memories of Rob and Michelle, memories of joy, laughter, and love flooded his thoughts. He saw their faces in his mind's eye, their smiles, their kindness, their warmth. He saw the house in Brentwood, a place that had once been full of shared moments, of dinners, stories, and laughter. But now that very place was marred by an unimaginable act of violence, a crime so brutal that it shattered everything Billy had known about his world. The house, once a sanctuary of comfort and joy, now felt like a hollow, haunted shell, a place that could never again hold the warmth it once did. Janice, heartbroken and overwhelmed, knelt beside Billy. Her own tears fell freely, mingling with the raw grief that filled the room. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly as if trying to absorb some of the pain that radiated from him. She whispered softly, though her voice trembled, "It can't be. It can't be Rob and Michelle." The words came out like a prayer, a desperate plea for the world to return to the way it had been just hours before. She, too, was paralyzed by the weight of what had happened. The grief was suffocating, the loss of two friends, two beloved souls, so sudden and so senseless that it was impossible for either of them to fully understand it. As the details of the crime began to emerge, the devastation deepened. The police confirmed that Rob and Michelle had been found in their home, both victims of a violent and fatal attack, each with multiple stab wounds. The brutality of the murders shocked everyone who heard about it, and the weight of it settled heavily on Billy's heart. He felt as though the world was closing in on him, the walls of his home no longer offering any comfort, no longer feeling safe. The lapse quickly sealed off the entire Brentwood area, turning the neighborhood into a chaotic crime scene. The flashing red and blue lights of police vehicles painted the streets with an eerie glow, a stark reminder that the safety and normalcy they had once known had been stripped away in a single night. Billy and Janice could not sit in their home any longer. The need to be with Rob to honor his memory was too great. They couldn't remain paralyzed by grief. They needed to see the scene for themselves. They needed to be there to say goodbye to understand. So they drove to Brentwood, the journey feeling like an eternity. As they approached the street, they were met with a grim sight. Yellow police tape stretched across the road, red and blue lights flashing in the distance, and the presence of law enforcement filling the air with an overwhelming sense of urgency and horror. The street once so familiar now felt foreign and ominous, the tragedy hanging thick in the air. When Billy stepped out of the car, the transformation in him was immediate and impossible to ignore. The man who had once been the epitome of warmth and humor now looked as though a lifetime of pain had been etched into his face in a matter of moments. His skin was pale, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a deep, unfathomable sorrow. He moved slowly, each step heavy with the weight of grief that seemed to drag him down. His face, once full of life and laughter, now appeared hollow, the joy drained from it entirely. Silent tears streamed down his face, each drop a reflection of the unbearable pain he was feeling inside. It was as if he were walking through a nightmare that he could not wake from. When Billy reached the house, he could barely bring himself to look at it. The house that had once been the setting for so many cherished moments, shared meals, laughter, and stories, now stood as a cold, empty monument to loss. He stood there rooted to the spot, unable to move, his eyes fixed on the house as though it held the answers to all his questions, as though looking at it could somehow make the horror feel less real. The silence around him was thick, suffocating, the only sound being the distant hum of the police activity. Time seemed to stretch out in those moments, every second feeling like an eternity. Billy couldn't hold back any longer. The grief, the loss, the sheer weight of the moment finally broke through, and he dissolved into uncontrollable sobs. His body shook with the force of his emotion, his chest heaving as if the sorrow were too great to bear. Janice stood beside him, holding his hand, her own tears flowing freely as they both mourned not only the loss of their friends, but the end of an era of shared joy, laughter, and unspoken understanding. They stood together, quietly mourning, knowing that nothing could ever fill the void left by Rob and Michelle's deaths. Billy could barely tear his gaze away from the house. It was as though he wanted to absorb every last detail of it, to commit it to memory before it, too, was lost forever. He wanted to hold on to the good times, to the love and warmth that had once filled that place. But as the grief surged within him, it became clear that there was nothing left but the pain of what had been lost. He stood there in silence, his heart aching, until Janice gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was a soft reminder that she was there for him, a beacon of support in the midst of the storm. With great effort, Billy finally tore himself away from the house, the memories and the life they had once shared. Together they left the scene, their hearts heavy with sorrow, knowing that the loss they had just experienced would stay with them forever. But the tragedy took yet another unexpected and heart-wrenching turn when Billy discovered the shocking secrets that Rob had kept hidden. Just hours after the devastating news of Rob and Michelle's deaths, Billy was consumed by a grief so intense that he could no longer remain silent. His emotions, raw and unfiltered, mixed with a fury that coursed through him, propelling him to reach out to Rolling Stone. He had to speak the truth, to reveal the full extent of the darkness that had consumed his friend's life and legacy. Billy's voice trembled with emotion as he spoke of Rob's deepest fears. The fears Rob had shared with him in private, fears that now seemed tragically prescient. Billy could barely contain the anguish in his heart as he recounted the private conversations he'd had with Rob over the years. He was worried about his son, Billy said, his voice thick with sorrow and barely contained rage. He trusted him with everything, his life, his legacy, his love, and this is what happened. How could someone do this to the people who loved him most? The anger in Billy's voice was undeniable, but it was mingled with a deep sadness. How could a son betray the father who had given him everything, the father who had fought so hard to protect him? Billy's words came out with a force that only a true friend could muster. "I know who did this," he declared, his voice quivering but resolute, a grim determination building in him. "It was Rob's son, the very son Rob loved and trusted with all his heart. The depth of the betrayal hit Billy like a punch to the gut. He could feel his grief morphing into fury. His voice broke, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. How could a son do this to his father? How could anyone be so cruel, so heartless? His mind was flooded with images of Rob's efforts to protect his family, to save his son from the darkness that had once nearly consumed him. Rob had worked tirelessly to help his son, trying to shield him from his own self-destructive tendencies. And yet in the end, it was that very son who had repaid him with betrayal and violence. Billy's pain transformed into something much darker, a burning anger that would not subside. He stood up, pacing the room with agitation, the force of his emotions causing his heart to race. "I won't let this go," he vowed, his voice filled with a fierce determination. "I won't let them get away with this. Rob deserves better. He deserves the truth to be told, not just for him, but for Michelle. Their legacy deserves to live on without being tainted by this tragedy." His anger was palpable, but so too was his grief, two emotions locked in an unrelenting struggle, each one feeding the other. Billy promised that he would not allow Rob's death to be swept into silence, that the truth about the family's betrayal would come to light. Billy's words, raw and unfiltered, sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the world at large. His heartfelt interview with Rolling Stone was the first public acknowledgement of something that had only been whispered about in the shadows: the possibility that Rob's own son was involved in the murders. Billy's heartbreak was not just for the loss of his dear friend, but for the devastation of a family torn apart by betrayal. His revelation ignited a firestorm of speculation, leaving the entertainment world in disbelief. Hollywood had always known Rob as a beloved director, a man whose career had touched the hearts of millions. But now, his death was shrouded in mystery, and his family's darkest secrets were being exposed for the first time. As news of Rob's death spread, so too did an outpouring of grief from fans all over the world. Social media exploded with tributes to the man who had brought so much joy to their lives. People shared their favorite moments from his films, scenes that had shaped their own experiences, that had made them laugh, cry, and reflect on their lives. The news of Rob's death felt like a collective loss, a hole ripped in the fabric of the world that could never be filled. Fans expressed their disbelief and sorrow, with many writing about the profound impact Rob's films had on them. "Rob Reiner was more than a director," one fan wrote. "He was a part of our lives. He taught us how to laugh, how to love, and how to live." Billy, in his grief, was not just mourning the loss of his closest friend. He was mourning the end of a legacy that had not only shaped his own life, but had touched the lives of millions. Rob was not just a director. He was a storyteller who had captured the essence of human experience with wit, humor, and depth. His films had brought people together, had made them see the world in new ways, and had given them an escape when they needed it most. And now, that light had been extinguished far too soon. For Billy, the loss was even more personal. Rob had been his brother, his closest confidant, the person who had stood by him through thick and thin. Their friendship had endured decades of triumphs and failures, of laughter and tears. They had been through it all together, supporting each other when no one else did. The connection they shared was rare, one that few could ever understand. And now, with Rob gone, Billy was left to grapple with the reality that his best friend, the one person who had always been there, was no longer a phone call away. As the news of Rob's death reverberated around the world, stories of their friendship began to surface. From their first meeting in the 1970s to their many years of working together, Billy and Rob had shared a bond that went far beyond professional collaboration. They had been more than friends. They had been family. Their connection had been built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and a deep understanding of one another that few people are ever fortunate enough to experience. Despite the immense pain of Rob's passing, Billy found solace in the memories they had created together. He thought of the late-night dinners, the shared laughter, the inside jokes that only they understood. Those moments, though gone, would never be forgotten. They were a part of him, etched into the very fabric of his being. Billy knew that the bond they had shared, one forged over decades of friendship and collaboration, would never die. It lived on in the films they had made, in the laughter they had shared, and in the unspoken understanding that had existed between them. Rob Reiner was gone, but the legacy of their friendship, the love they had for each other, would live on forever. Billy would carry it with him in his heart for the rest of his life. And though the pain of losing Rob would never fully go away, Billy knew that the memories they had created together would continue to shape him, just as Rob had shaped the lives of so many others. If you felt the heartbreak of losing someone you loved, if you've ever experienced betrayal that cut to your very core, then you know how deep the wounds of this tragedy run. But the story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. If you want to keep hearing the untold stories of Hollywood, uncover the darkest secrets, and witness the raw emotions behind the legends, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Don. Miss the next chapter of this shocking journey. Rob's legacy deserves to be remembered and the truth must come to light. Join us and let's keep his memory alive.